Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Spiral Lab live stream. It's great to have you here. Today, we're talking about work, which can be kind of a heavy subject, and then specifically being disabled at work. But first, I just want to say hi to everybody who's here on the live and ask you if you would please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box. If you're new to this live stream, please let me know who you are and where you're from. And I also thought that it might be kind of interesting to sort of get a little bit of a conversation started. If you feel like it, you never have to do anything, but if you feel like it, if you would tell me a little bit about maybe what was the best job you ever had and the worst job that you ever had and why, and or what do you feel like you struggle with the most in terms of employment in the workplace, which is primarily what I'm going to be talking about today. Although I'm going to go over a few other things as well. And if you're watching this on the replay, hi, so happy to have you here as well. One of the things that you can do to support any YouTuber, including me, is to like the video, subscribe to the channel, obviously, and hit the notification bell so that you get notified of new videos coming up. And leaving a comment is always a great way to let YouTube know that you support this channel. So if you're watching on the replay, please feel free to leave a comment about your best and worst jobs and why and what you struggle with, etc. So yeah, I have a few notes here. So I wanted to, before I go and say hi to everybody in the chat box, which I'm going to do in just a second, I wanted to talk just a tiny bit about sort of some things that are coming up. So I just mentioned the ways that you can help us grow our channel by, liking and subscribing and commenting, all of that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that we are trying to grow this channel, and it's really related to the conversation we're having today about work, because more and more this YouTube channel is becoming my work, part of my work, and I would love it if it could also help to support me financially. So to that end, I'm trying to grow the channel so that it can become even more income producing. Right now, the channel makes about as much money as it costs, like the streaming software and the hardware that I need, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, the income that I get from ads right now covers that, but not much more. So anyway, I wanted to let you know about some things that are coming, that are really actually coming and in the pipeline. I'm hoping very soon to start publishing some vlogs, maybe even once a week. I don't know. I'm thinking about long term. I want to be making video essays, but it's a pretty steep learning curve to get me there. So I'm thinking about sort of vlogging the process of getting me to the video essays, so you can really see how the sausage gets made and not just like the end product, which sometimes can make it look like it's really easy, and I never want to do that. Another thought that I've had, which I would love to hear from you, either in the chat box or in the comments, if you think that this is at all interesting, in the Mighty Networks community that is called Divergent Design Studios, which I'd love to have you all join. I know many of you who are here in the chat box are already members of Divergent Design Studios. We have a sort of co-working session, we call them studio time, on Sunday afternoon, when Joel, my husband, and I do our weekly food prep, and we call it the food prep studio time, and people can come onto Zoom and prep their meals alongside of us, because we do most of our meal prep. I shouldn't say really we, because Joel really is the person who does food in our family. Most of the food prep on Sunday, and this is something that he used to do in his previous family before we were married for years and years, but we have only started reinstituting that, and it has really made such a world of difference to us. And I know that food prep and feeding ourselves can be really challenging to a lot of neurodivergent people. And so I was wondering if it might actually be interesting to do it as a live stream and not just as a like Zoom co-working session. Um, he's a very interesting and entertaining guy, and he's a really great cook. And maybe we could even talk about like the shopping, the planning that we do, and the shopping that we do, and take you along for the ride. And anyway, it was just a thought that I had. I wanted to kind of float it and see if anybody might be at all interested in a live stream that you could either catch live, obviously, or on the replay. That was just basically sort of our weekly food prep. So that's another thing that might be coming. And then obviously the long-term goal is that Jesse Meadows and I both want to be making video essays about like sort of, bigger, meatier, substantive issues. Really, I think about a lot of the live streams that I've done as kind of rough drafts of those video essays. So the video essays would be kind of along the same lines as the topics of the live streams. But really, we need to kind of level up our skills a little bit more before we get there. So we're thinking about some ways to do that in the short term that might be interesting to you. So, oh, and I should probably keep my arm down. I have a terrible case, I think you can see it, of poison ivy. It's here. Sorry, and it's all over my legs. I've been working in the garden. So, yeah. All right. Let's see if there's anything else that I wanted to say about what's coming up. Yeah, I think that's mostly it. I would just love your feedback about what would be interesting. Those are sort of my thoughts. If there are other things that you would love to see from this channel, I'm all ears. So please let me know what would be interesting to you. All right, I'm actually going to go say hi to everybody in the chat before I do the intro proper for the topic for today, okay? Great to see Paul Saxberg here. Recent subscriber, Canadian, first live stream that he's caught. I'm so glad you're here. Fantastic. Robin says, hello, just here for a few minutes before I have to get back to work. Ugh, ironically, haha, exactly. Robin, if you're still here, I hope that you'll get a chance to watch the rest of it on the replay. Amanda says, hi, Marta, I missed the intro, but I'm happy to be here. First live stream I've made it to. Highly recommend being a part of DDS to everyone also. Oh, thank you so much for that shout out to DDS. Yeah, I was going to talk about DDS in just a second. I mean, really briefly. But yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Robin says, would love to see vlogs from you. Oh, that's really, that's really affirming, Robin, because I sort of go back and forth about like, is anybody really interested in like the minutia of my life? But I do think that that sort of documenting the process of getting myself to the capacity and the skill level to be able to make the kinds of videos that I actually want to make could be interesting. I don't know. Anyway, that's what I'm working on. I want to get a couple of them in the bag before I even start publishing them, but soon. And we'll see how it goes. But thanks for the support, Robin. I really appreciate it. HMY8799 says, hi, first time making it on a live. Feel so lucky to have found your channel a couple months ago. You said a number of things that made so much sense to me that I've never heard from other experts. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you found the channel. I'm so glad that you're here at the live stream. I hardly think of myself as an expert. Well, I guess I am. I mean, I do think of myself as an expert in that I am myself a neurodivergent person. But I'm really glad that the things that I say have been useful to you. That's fantastic. And you go on to say, yes, you should absolutely make this as big a part of your own career. That is, if you love it, which as a listener, watcher, as a parent that you do. I love your approach. Oh, thank you so much. That really is helpful feedback, because this really is, in addition to DDS, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, this is really like how I want to make my living. Like I really want, like again, it's kind of funny that we're talking about it in the in a live stream about work, but really what I want to do is work for you, right? But it gets complicated because, like, you know, the ways that one can go about making money can be tricky and blah, 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 blah. But anyway, wonderful to get that support. Robin says, always love food tips. Food can be a struggle for me. Yeah, for sure. I think that that's true for a lot of us. And it was true for us. It's been a long process of getting us to a place where we're in a pretty good place around food. Like, the first problem was that the kitchen was such a disaster that it really made it difficult to prepare food and to clean up. And then we were able to fix up our kitchen, which I've talked about in other places, and I think I've talked about it a little bit here, but I will take people in one of my vlogs soon. I'll take people on a tour of the kitchen. And then, because we're both disabled in various ways, we were ending up getting tons and tons of takeout. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with ordering out your food, or, I mean, I'm just such a believer in whatever works, and there is zero judgment about what you eat or how it gets prepared or who prepares it or delivers it or anything else. But for us, the reliance on takeout was causing a real financial burden that we couldn't really afford. So we had to come up with a different solution, and it feels like we really have figured something out that works, even given our disabilities. So that was sort of part of the inspiration for thinking about a food prep live stream. And then there's some other channels that are doing similar things that I thought was really interesting as well. Yeah, so Amanda says, yes, please do a live stream regarding food prep or food stuff. Also would love the perspective from both of you and him, since I'm also the one in my house who does earn less food tasks. I'd love to talk more about that, Amanda. I could just go on about this right now, but I do want to get to the main topic. But this is really interesting. Yeah, let's talk about that for sure soon, okay? Oh no, poison ivy is the worst. Yes, for sure it is. And the irony for me with poison ivy is that I'm intensely allergic to it and have been my whole life. And I have this, like, it almost feels like a disability that I cannot identify it. Like, I cannot see it. It's almost like I just can't see it. And so I just get it all the time. Vatsalia says, hey, Marta, glad to be here. So glad to have you here. Fantastic. Okay. As always in these live streams, please, in real time, without any self-censorship, as you wish, leave comments and thoughts and questions and perspectives. But do please understand that I'll go back and forth from the chat to speaking, but it's hard for me to do it like in real time. So I'll come back to it in a little while. It's very hard for me to focus on both at the same time. I'm really glad you're all here. It's really lovely to have you all here. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to do, sort of by way of introduction, was just to say that this topic of work and of being disabled in the workplace, which is the main topic of this live stream today, came up during, I'm trying to remember, I don't even think that it was initially in a peer support group. This is in the Mighty Networks community that I helped to run, called Divergent Design Studios. So we have multiple kinds of events in DDS, including what we call studio time, which I was talking about before, because we do have this food prep studio time on Sunday afternoons for 2 hours. But it's the only one that has a theme. And of course, people could come and not prep their food. They can come and do whatever they want during that studio time. They're really what other people call body doubling or co-working sessions. And we have them not every single day, but almost every single day. There are 2-hour blocks of time where you can join other people in the community on Zoom and just get your work done. But at the beginning of those and at the end of those, we check in and check out. And it seems like maybe this conversation first came up in a check-in or check-out. I can't remember. And then it seemed kind of rich and interesting. So I decided to make it the topic of our peer support group, which is a second type of event that we have. Right now we have 2 peer support groups per week on Tuesdays and Fridays, and we're about to add a third one to accommodate. We have so many people from Australia. Love our Australian members, but the time zone is a little bit tricky. So we're trying to come up with a third peer support group time that will accommodate our Australian members, as well as maybe some folks on the west coast of the Americas. So we'll see. So this is the topic of our peer support group this week. And on Tuesday, we had just a really rich and deep conversation about this topic. And we'll have another one on Friday, tomorrow. But I decided to also make it be the topic of my live stream because it's just like really pressing on me, and it's something that I feel deeply about. I think that I have, usually when I pick a topic for my live stream, I have some like concrete thoughts and not solutions, but like some like the beginning of some answers or steps or strategies or something. I don't know. I feel like this is much looser. I feel like this whole issue, how to earn a living, is how to earn a living, and especially in the context of, capitalism and the way our society is structured right now in ways that are so disabling for so many people. Obviously, I'm speaking specifically about the ways that it's disabling for neurodivergent people. I just feel like this is the sort of final frontier. Like I have lots of ideas about how to make your life better, how to disrupt shame, how to design things that help to create an environment for you that really accommodates who you are as you are on your own terms. But it all kind of presupposes that you've figured out a way to support yourself financially. And that is the piece that is actually the most difficult, I think, for so many of us. And as a consequence, many of us are very poor. Many of us are quite marginalized economically and live with a lot of economic fragility. And I have been in that position. I'm not in it as much right now, but that could change anytime. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in the live stream. But anyway, I just wanted to say that the conversation started in Divergent Design Studios, and it is just a really rich, amazing community of primarily built around the concept that what we need is peer support, and we need to see ourselves reflected back to us in positive ways and empathetic ways. And so we'd love to have you join us in Divergent Design Studios, and there either is or will be, as soon as the live stream is over, I think there already is a link in the description that will take you to the sign-up page. The recommended membership price is $20 a month. And that really is the rate at which I can pay myself and pay other people sustainably. So if it's sustainable for you, I appreciate it if you can join at that level. But as I was just saying, I understand that so many of us are not in that position and are quite economically marginalized. And I'm very committed to there being no financial barriers to joining DDS. So there are also sliding fee scale options that you can join at. And if the lowest of those options, which right now is $5 a month, is still outside of your reach, all you need to do is email me at marta@martarose.com, and you don't need to explain, and you don't need to apologize or feel ashamed or anything else. Just say, could I please have a link to the free plan for DDS, and I will send that right away. So yeah, we'd love to have you join us. It's an amazing community. All right. That was quite a long intro, wasn't it? But I felt like it was important to say some of those things. Now, finally getting down to the topic at hand. Actually, before I start the topic, let me just really quickly look again at the comments, and then I will really just launch in, all right, and go back and forth, back and forth. Um, um, Paul says, regarding being unable to identify poison ivy, are you perhaps face blind? I know many ND people are. Maybe it's related. That could be, that's interesting. I mean, I am a little bit. I don't have a like severe case of it, but I definitely have a mild case of it. It takes me quite a bit of real connection with somebody before I can recognize their face. And I don't know, maybe it is related. But like there are other things that I can recognize. So I don't know. It's interesting. It feels like it's I don't know, there's stuff about people and allergies, like you're weirdly attracted to the things that you're allergic to sometimes. I don't know what it is. But that's an interesting theory. But it's the same phenomenon. It feels the same, like just in the same way that I can't recognize a face sometimes. So that's a really interesting insight. Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to skip a couple because I'm not sure what they're related to, but I'll try to come back to them at the end. Paul goes on to say, absolutely, the presupposition that we are already supporting ourselves is the biggest problem with not just your advice, but with almost everybody's advice. Exactly. I think that that's right. It doesn't matter how reasonably priced your service is if my bank account is in the negative. So thank you for offering the email option. It is very appreciated. Yes, and Paul, I get that. I get that, and I've been in that place myself fairly recently, and that's why I always, like I said, there are no financial. There should be in my community no financial barrier to joining, and once you've joined, nobody ever knows besides me who is paying what. Lots of people are on a free plan, some because they were sort of comped from previous programs I've run, and some because their financial situation changed after they joined, and some because they joined on the free plan, but there's absolutely no shame in that at all. All right, I'm going to move on now. I'm not ignoring you, HMY8799, but it feels like a conversation we'll come back to at the end, okay? All right. I have a few notes, but like I said, this feels pretty loosey-goosey. Like I'm not even really completely sure what I want to say, and I don't have any like solutions at the end of this. So if you're here for solutions, this probably isn't your live stream, but I do think that I at least have like some empathy and some insights that might be helpful. I don't know. First of all, something that came up in our Tuesday peer support group that I wanted to address and recognize is that there are lots of different kinds of work, quote unquote work, and that we have lots of different feelings about calling what we do work. And so I wanted to sort of go through some of the types of work that I want to recognize as work, and then talk about the specific one that that I had in mind for this live stream. So I think first of all, there is some type of work which I would call work. Other people and other people like don't want to claim that word work for what I would call sort of intentionally unpaid work, right? Like our hobbies and special interests that we don't want to monetize. But the reason that I like to think of it as work is because I think that the way that I define work is sort of anything that we do in the world that has value for us, for others, for the world, not just monetary value. And so I think that like it's possible that you could get to the end of your life never having earned a penny, and still have a body of work, what I would consider a body of work. It might just be like kindness or being good at relationships or being an effective communicator. I mean, there's lots of ways that I believe that one can amass what I would call a body of work, your artistic output, your caregiving, like all kinds of things that you may or may not ever want to be paid for. And I still think of it as work, but it's not primarily what I'm talking about today. Okay. Um, and then a second type of work that is not primarily what I want to talk about today, but I do want to talk about it a little bit, is the unpaid work that many of us do that most certainly should be compensated in some way, right? And I'm thinking especially of like home labor and volunteer work. And I think that this is the kind of work that really capitalism relies on, like the world, the capitalism, our economy as it exists now couldn't function but for the very important labor that so many of us do that is never compensated. And I have very much been in the position of doing both home labor and uncompensated volunteer work. That having done that work, then I kind of got screwed at the end of the day because I first of all didn't get paid for it, and then afterwards, even though people sort of pretend like they really value it, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, it doesn't get valued, and so you often feel like you have very little to show for yourself, certainly in monetary terms, right? In terms of the capacity to support yourself. That was the position that I very much found myself in when I left my first marriage, having spent 10 to 15 years primarily out of the paid workforce, doing homemaking, being a mom, and doing an enormous amount of volunteer work in my community. So anyway, I want to recognize that that is incredibly important work, and that I believe that there should be mechanisms for not just recognizing it and valuing it, but valuing it financially. That there aren't. My situation was complicated by the fact that I that I had done most of that work outside of the legal institution of marriage, and so when my marriage finally was recognized, and then subsequently I got a divorce, most of the work that I had done in that marriage that would have been accounted for at least in part through like spousal support in a normal divorce didn't get acknowledged because my actual marriage was much shorter than the relationship during which time I had been doing the work. So that's another story for another day. But again, I want to make clear that I really believe that that kind of work is work. But it's not, again, primarily what I want to talk about today. Yeah. I'm sorry, I have a note here that I want to decide whether I want to talk about this now or later. Um, I think I'll talk about it later. And then the next kind of work that that I want to recognize is sort of gig work and self-employed work, entrepreneurial work, like the kind of work that I do now, where I'm sort of figuring out how to make a living doing this kind of work, which has its benefits and its drawbacks, both um, and even in the context of this sort of work, or I shouldn't even say even, in the context of this sort of work, I also feel quite disabled by the world that we live in, and but it's the only form of work that I have found yet that feels at all possible to me. So that's why I do what I do, as a way to earn a living, to earn a financial living. So again, that's a whole other conversation as well, which I'd love to come back to, is like being self-employed and how that works or doesn't work for disabled people. But the primary type of work that I wanted to talk about today, where I feel like we are most in, or at least I should only speak for myself, but where I have been most intensely debilitatingly and shame-inducingly disabled is in the sort of the realm of being employed in the workplace, employed by someone else in the workplace, right? Which is the traditional way that most people make money, right? Most people in the world make money by getting a job and working for someone else and getting a paycheck, a regular paycheck. And I know it's different country by country, but certainly in the United States, there's all kinds of other benefits that get tacked on to employment, like health insurance, time off, paid time, all kinds of things like that that get tacked on as benefits to employment if you're working in a job for somebody else. Now, they don't always get tacked on, don't get me wrong. Lots and lots and lots of jobs that have no additional benefits other than a paycheck, and that even and the paycheck itself is often quite small. But that's the realm of work that I want to talk about, that I find just sort of acutely disabling. Well, I would say for neurodivergent people, but honestly, I think that this version of work, which is what I call sort of factory style work, and I'll explain that in a second. I don't think that it's good for any. I don't think it's normal or natural or anything like that. And I don't think that it's good for anybody, including so-called neurotypical people. But I think that it can be just sort of almost impossible in any kind of sustainable long-term way for many of us who are neurodivergent. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, and I also want to recognize that there are lots and lots of exceptions. Like there's always an exception. Like there are, I'm sure, neurodivergent people who have been able to find a place for themselves in the workforce that works, that they can make sustainable, and to the extent that they are doing that because it's satisfying to them and enables them to live their lives the way that they want to live their lives, that's fantastic. But I don't think that that's the majority of us. And again, I just want to emphasize that I think that the way that work is structured right now in capitalist societies is just really bad. It's really detrimental just to human beings, period. So I made a little list of some of the things that I think are so awful about the way that work is structured and that make it so difficult for neurodivergent people to just get a job. And as I'm going through my little list, I'd love to have you let me know in the chat whether any of this resonates for you. And if you have other ideas as well about what it is that is so disabling about the contemporary workplace. So among the many things, I think the hours, that the sheer number of hours, the traditional job is 8 to 9 hours. I mean, this is if you're lucky, right? 8 to 9 hours a day, 5 days a week. 48 to 52 weeks a year, right? Like some people get some time off, some people don't get any time off. But in the United States anyway, most people don't get more than a handful of weeks, maybe 4 weeks if you're really lucky, of paid time off, and maybe a little bit of paid sick time. But I think that the sheer number of hours for neurodivergent people, especially when we're dealing with all kinds of sensory issues and sensory overload, like being in a workplace which is often very unaccommodating to our sensory needs. The environments are often incredibly overstimulating. The fluorescent lights, the noises, the ugliness, and I'm thinking especially right now of offices, but like all kinds of work, right? The social interactions, the sheer number of um, social interactions and having to negotiate those kinds of things, like that's just exhausting. And if you're expected to do that, um, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, most weeks of the year, like that's just a recipe for burnout. It's just a recipe for meltdown, and um, and I think that many of us feel really kind of ashamed that we can't make it, that we can't do it, especially when I think one of the biggest struggles often for us internally is that in certain contexts we can seem so competent and so able to work hard, right? And so able to accomplish things. And yet, in this particular workforce environment, we just can't do it. And so then the question is, well, why could you do it over here but not here? Why are you so competent in that context, and yet you can't support yourself financially? I mean, I think that we're often made to feel like we're faking it, or that we're entitled, or that we're lazy, or that we're sort of dilettantes. I know that I have been made to feel that through so much of my life. Like, well, you're one of the smartest people I know. Why can't you just get a job? You're so competent. Of course you could get a job. There's all kinds of jobs that you could get. And some people start listing off the jobs that I can get. And like in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, but like the sheer amount of social interaction that I would have to endure, and I just know that, um, that I could do it probably for a while, but that I would just burn out and it would become impossible. So I think that the hours and the environment are a big part of the issue. Even if we were willing to even if we were both willing and able to overcome the next couple of things that I want to talk about, which is just the sheer meaninglessness, right, of so many jobs. Um, like so much of employment these days is just like meaningless. It's just utter, I don't know, like I think that for neurodivergent people especially, it's just like soul crushing to do work over and over and over again that just feels meaningless, that doesn't feel urgent, that doesn't seem like it matters, that doesn't seem like it makes any difference in the world other than to make somebody else rich. Like it's hard to devote your life, the majority of your life, to that. I think for anybody, again, but especially for neurodivergent people, I think. And also sort of the lack of autonomy and control. I think that that's a big issue for a lot of us too. Like, and I think that this is especially true for people who have been traumatized in their lives for trying to assert themselves and then being sort of smacked down, for being defiant and being oppositional and being impulsive and all of these things. Um, I think that that lack of autonomy and control. I don't know about you, but like being in jobs where you can just see a better way, like you just know, like there would be such a better way to do this, and um, and like you don't have any authority, you don't have any input, you don't have any way to do the things that so obviously need to be done. Like I think that that also can be just really soul crushing, along with the meaninglessness of so much of work. Um, so I think that those are some of the things that a few of the reasons that many jobs in the contemporary workplace are just really, really disabling to us. I'm going to go look at the comments and see if anybody has any thoughts about that. And then what I thought I would do for the rest of our time is I just wanted to share with you some of the jobs that I've had, and I've had and failed at. because basically that's the story of my life, is like jobs that I've had and failed at until now, and knock wood that this is going to become a reasonably reliable source of income to me between Divergent Design Studios and YouTube, because I really do love everything that I do. Like I literally, for the first time in my life, wake up every morning excited to do my work. Let's see. So yes, HMY says, just saying that I have yet to work as any kind of professional, but I do know where and why people succeed professionally in jobs that are actually important. Right. If everyone could make their work what they enjoyed as a hobby, the world would be a much better place. Ideally, compensation will be part of it. Yeah, I agree. I think that, and I do think that there are some ways that we can make our hobbies and our passions into income. I wanted to recognize that sometimes we don't want to, right? But I still think of that. I personally still think of that as work. I still think of anything that you do that is meaningful to you, like kind of accumulates as a body of work that I think should be recognized and admired and seen. But I also think that if you do want to try to monetize your passions and your hobbies, there are ways to do that. And in fact, like that's sort of what I'm doing, right? Like neurodivergence and supporting neurodivergent people and critical theory around disability are some of my passions. And so in my community and in this channel, interior design, like I'm trying to monetize, like such a bad word, but that's what it is. So let's just call it what it is. I'm trying to monetize those passions so that I can work for myself instead of for somebody else. Or basically, I shouldn't say work for myself. I should say I want to work for you. I want to work for you, right? But yeah, and to that end, I guess that one thing that I should, I want to just promote a little bit because I just booked her, is that on, I think it's June the 9th. I think June the 9th, if that's a Thursday, I'm going to have my friend and YouTube mentor, Heather Ramirez, on the show to talk about just that, like how it really is possible to build a YouTube channel where you can make a modest middle class living. I mean, if that's something that you're interested in doing around whatever is your passion. Heather has done it. Heather's husband is doing it. And this isn't like a get rich quick, become a YouTube millionaire kind of thing at all. It's really about like how you could sort of, in a slow and steady way, build a channel that would afford you a modest middle class income. So anyway, mark your calendars. Heather Ramirez. She also has a couple of great channels, a vlog channel and a YouTube coaching channel that you can take a look at. Anyway, I'm sorry, I got distracted. I'm really excited that Heather's coming on the show on the 9th. Mad Doll says, I've been feeling like this lately. I give so much time and energy, almost exclusively to home life. Even when I was working 2 jobs outside of the home, I did all housework. Yeah. Hashtag patriarchy, hashtag gender roles. Gosh, you know what? I really want to talk about that, but I'm almost feeling like it's too important of a topic to do it the disservice of like giving it a little aside in this live stream. But I'm wondering if that isn't just a fantastic topic to do as a whole live stream, because I have been in both of those positions. Less so when I was working outside the home, there was more equity. But when I was doing all of the homemaking, yeah. And I do want to talk about the whole issue. This is what I was just like, took a second to think about whether I wanted to talk about it then or later. And I think I still want to talk about it later, but I'll just mention it now, which is the whole issue about sort of both the promise and the precarity of dependency and interdependency. Like on the one hand, many of us in the disabled community, those of us who, you know, are working around issues of disability justice, um, argue that being dependent shouldn't be a bad or a shameful thing, and that human beings are dependent, and that there shouldn't necessarily be this like automatic expectation that the that your number one goal in life is to become autonomous and self-sustaining and independent. Like I think that that is a big part of the problem, right? That we need to dismantle systems and expectations around the sort of extreme independence and extreme self-sufficiency, especially economic self-sufficiency, that we have in our society and culture. I think it's really acute in the United States. I think that there's a little bit less of that kind of extremism around those ideals in other countries. So on the one hand, I'm like a big critic of the like this notion that everybody can and should be independent, self-sufficient, autonomous, especially financially, and that's even what we should be striving for. On the other hand, I have personally been in the precarious position of having allowed myself to become financially dependent on someone else, and then had that really explode on me in incredibly traumatic ways when I decided that I needed to leave that relationship. And ironically, I am now in yet another relationship where I'm economically dependent on my spouse. It does feel like a completely different situation, and I learned so much from the previous situation that I feel like I have much more insight um, into into what is possible and not possible in this relationship, and I feel as confident as one can that what happened to me before won't happen again. But having said that, even if my spouse wouldn't do what my first spouse did, he could die, he could lose his job. Like there's lots of ways that the income that he makes that we depend on could disappear, and that I would be once again in that kind of precarious situation. So I think that I guess I did just talk about it. I said I wasn't going to talk about it, and then I did. But that whole like the promise and the precarity of dependence and interdependence and sort of dismantling our obsession with economic independence and self-sufficiency is again another sticky wicket that I think that we need to talk more about. You know, it's so hard to talk about money, and it's so hard to talk about I don't know, it's hard to talk about. It's hard to talk about monetizing things, because then you get accused of being a capitalist. But how are you supposed to support yourself if you don't ask people to pay you for your work, right? It's all very confusing, and it's a conversation that I would love to continue having. But that whole dependence independence thing, I definitely want. Maybe we'll do another live stream on that whole issue as well. But anyway, the upshot, Mad Doll, is that I feel you. I definitely feel you on all of those fronts. Amanda says, in the contemporary workplace, I feel like I would stick out like a sore thumb. Can't wear comfy clothes, can't sit crisscross applesauce, and can't tell people to nicely even shut up. Right. Oh, so I feel like what is debilitating is shame, not fitting in, having to mask, having to be a certain way. Right. I also noticed I can get a lot more done in a day, but in spurts, i.e. get a ton done between 10 a.m. and noon, and then a ton done between, say, 6 and 8, then laze around and suddenly have energy at midnight. Right. Amanda, I think that you're really getting at the heart of a lot of what I was talking about there in terms of what is so debilitating about the workplace, that like that we don't have control, that we don't have autonomy, that like in terms of like even the hours that we work, right? Like we're expected to pack it all in into a certain amount of certain hours of the day that may not be the best in terms of us getting work done, and also the environment. Like I laughed when you talked about comfy clothes, because I'm remembering when I was a high school English teacher. This was years ago in the early 90s. At the very beginning, in fact, I guess I could talk about that in the context of bunch more comments, but I think I'm going to move on and just mark where I left off. I was going to talk about some of the jobs that I've had and failed at. But you know me, I don't really believe in failure. I'm a designer, I'm a design thinker, and so I think that there is no such thing as failure, just information. And I have taken enormous amounts of information from the many jobs that I've had, and incorporate much of what I learned about what was good about them and why they didn't work into how I work now. But anyway, let me just take you on a little tour of my employment history. And part of the reason I'm doing this is because when we were having our peer support conversation on Tuesday, I mentioned that I'm 57 years old and I've never had, I'm pretty sure that this is right, I've never held the same job for longer than, I think, maybe 3 years is the longest that I've ever held a job, like the same job. And I'm not just talking about like the same employer, like I'm almost talking about like the same field. Like I have just flitted all over the place. And somebody in the peer support group said that was really affirming, because they have a lot of shame about not having really held a job for a long time. And certainly I think that we're made to feel ashamed when we get older for having sort of dabbled, like for, even if we've like moved from from employer to employer to employer, as long as it's like there's a trajectory that like accumulates into a profession, into a professional life, like there's some respectability around that. But when you've never held any job for more than 2 or 3 years, and almost every job that you've had has been in an entirely different field, there can be a lot of shame around that. And I recognize that. And so I, like, as part of dispelling any sort of shame, any sort of sense of shame about that, I thought I would just tell you the story of my life as a worker. As a teenager, my first job, I lived in rural Indiana, where we grow a lot of corn, and one of the main, I don't know if this is still true today, although I can't imagine that they've come up with a better way to do it. Maybe they use migrant labor now. But anyway, when you're growing seed corn, you grow 2 different kinds of corn side by side, and then at a particular time in the growth of the corn, one of the types of corn, you take the tassel off. It's called detasseling the corn, so that the other type of corn will pollinate it and it creates a hybrid, right? Like that's how corn hybrids are made, seed corn hybrids. And they hire, again, I don't know if they still do, but back in the day, this would have been in the 80s, like the late 70s and early 80s. They would hire kids to go out on these machines, and just like you'd be moving through the fields and you'd just pull the tassels off the corn. And like, speaking of my poison ivy, like I'm also incredibly, I know now, allergic to grass, and corn is a grass. So like this, like weeks and weeks in the field, and I would just be like, I can't even imagine how I survived it now. But I was just like an allergic mess the whole time. So that was like my very first job. And I did that many summers. It was basically the kind of job you could get in rural Indiana. Then right out of college, I was a high school English teacher, right? And I'll tell that story now. So this was back in the days of like pantyhose and slips. The expectation anyway, that's how professional women dressed. And of course bras. And I worked about an hour away from where I lived, but my then partner worked about halfway in between. So I would drop her off and then go to work. And then on the way home, I would drive from my school to her school, pick her up, and then she would drive the rest of the way. And literally in the car on that last leg, I had gotten very adept at undressing myself under my clothes. Like I could take my bra off, I could take my pantyhose off, my slip off, my underwear off. Like I would be stripped bare naked under the outer layer of clothing that I had on before we ever got home. And it was like, it felt like a matter of life and death almost. Like there was no waiting. There was no way that I could wait until I got home. That half hour, I just had to get all of that crap off. And I again, I look back and I think I survived like a whole school day every day dressed in a way that like made me so acutely uncomfortable that I had to strip my clothing off in the car on the way home. Like, what is up with that? But on top of that, like, there's so much that I loved about teaching, and it was not meaningless, but it was really overstimulating. You know, I had too many students and too many different classrooms that I worked in, and too many records to keep and plans to keep on track of, and the emotional labor of it was just pretty intense. So I only did that for about 3 years. And after that, I had I asked you to tell me what was your best and worst job, and I'd love to hear still. I would say that one of the best jobs that I ever had, ironically, even though it was largely meaningless, was as a technical writer. I worked, of all places, I was a temporary worker for like 3 years. I was a temporary worker for 3 years, so they didn't have to pay me benefits. At a big pharmaceutical company here in Philadelphia. It was the first job I got when we moved to Philly in like 92. And I was writing user manuals, in-house user manuals for the HR and benefits information systems. So for the people who worked in HR and benefits, I was like writing the manuals because it was all new. It was all newly computerized, and so they didn't know how to use computers. I didn't really know how to use computers either, but I could learn how to do like the push this button, push that button kind of thing. And I wrote like the little in-house technical manuals, and so that was kind of satisfying. I look back on it, and it had elements of writing, it had elements of graphic design, but really the reason it was such a great job, other than the fact that I wasn't compensated appropriately as a temporary worker, was that I just had the best boss. Like she was just such a delight to work for. She made everybody feel like part of the team. And so like, even though it theoretically could have felt meaningless, she just imbued everything that we did with some sort of meaning. And she expressed gratitude all the time and rewarded it. And she was like a unicorn boss in a corporate environment. And I think that I look back on that and sometimes think maybe I should have just stuck with that job. I mean, I had such sort of ethical qualms about working for a big pharmaceutical company, but it really was like one of the best jobs that I've ever had. And then I went to law school, which I loved. I loved law school, but being a lawyer was just an utter disaster. I'm looking down my list, and probably if being a technical writer with a unicorn boss was the best job I've ever had, being a lawyer was by far the worst job that I've ever had. I mean, I had to keep track of and bill my time in 6-minute increments. Can you imagine? Like, I literally had to keep track of my days in 6-minute increments. So if I went to the bathroom, like could you do it in 6 minutes, or was it going to take 12? Right? Like, it was just insane. And the learning curve in the field that I was in was so steep, and the expectation for our billable hours was so high. And even though I worked in a department that was like pretty low stakes compared to so much of sort of big law firm law, And I had another dream boss. Like, I've been really lucky in a lot of ways with my bosses. I had another dream boss. I worked part-time. I only worked 4 days a week, which was kind of unheard of in the law field, especially coming right out of law school. My boss was so supportive, was so great. And still, I just like literally, I took the train into the city every day, and walking from the train station to my office, like I literally felt like I was going to throw up every single day on that walk. And I did that for like 3 years. And before that, I had clerked for a judge who was just awful and mean, like maybe the worst boss that I've ever had, for 2 years. And that whole 5 years of my life, like I look back on it and it was just so awful. My work life, like interestingly, those were also the first years of my daughter's life. So my first years as a mom were some of the best years of my life. Like, it's kind of like interesting how I can sort of bifurcate those years. Like, the mom part of my life was so wonderful. The work part of my life was just like almost unbearable. And I literally schemed and plotted to get myself out of that position. And after I quit the law firm, that's when I like entered into this really long phase of doing homemaking and volunteer work in my community, which really did suit me in lots of ways. I loved being a mom of small children. I loved the sort of meaningfulness of volunteer work. And I even loved the ritual, and there's a lot I loved about homemaking. Cooking, we were talking earlier in the live stream about cooking being, somebody else and I were talking about some cooking being our partner's jobs, but part of the reason that it's Joel's job is because I'm just kind of done, because I did that for many years. But anyway, I look back on those years as having been enormously fulfilling and meaningful to me. And I mean, they were also hard and frustrating in many ways, don't get me wrong. But that period of my life was sort of side by side with my life now, some of my best work time. But unfortunately, although there had been lots of promises made about how valuable that work was in the context of our family, none of those promises were honored when I eventually decided to leave that marriage for other reasons. And then at the end of that time, when my kids got older and I had gotten a master's degree in fiction writing, I was able to get a job as an adjunct professor teaching again. So I'd sort of come back around to teaching and teaching English, but now at the college level. And I also loved that job a lot. But again, I was an adjunct. I was completely exploited. I was underpaid. I had no benefits. I had no job security. And then in the context of this really kind of brutal divorce where I went through incredible mental health crisis, I lost that job, which is what happens to adjunct professors because we're a dime a dozen, and there was always somebody else to take my courses. So I lost that job, and then in and out of all of those kinds of jobs, I worked as a bookseller, making like under maybe $10 an hour. You know, like Walmart wages. Like I probably, if I had done it full time, I probably still would have qualified for welfare benefits. And I also did some work taking care of other people's kids, which I liked at that time of my life. And I've also done quite a bit of work as a house cleaner and sort of organizer for other people. Those were ways that in between times, I was able to piece together some income. But finally, I was a massage therapist for like a brief minute, but that really, for lots of other reasons, didn't really work out. Partly because it was just so physically demanding, and partly because I wasn't very good at sort of marketing that kind of business so that I could work for myself, which had been the idea all along. And then finally, I sort of started working for myself, doing the work that I do now, which is enormously gratifying. But that's sort of the long, sad story of my professional life and my life as a worker. And again, I think that, well, maybe I'll try to sum up in a minute with some sort of takeaways, but let's go back to the comments quickly, okay? Amanda says, I am reading What Can a Body Do, which you recommended in the live stream, and like how she talks about things being a misfit, like it doesn't go together, us and that kind of work. Yes, Amanda. I even have that book right here, and I love it. I love it so much. It's just a great book. I always forget where the camera actually is. What Can a Body Do by Sarah Hendren, and the subtitle is How We Meet the Built World. So it's a lot about design, sort of design and disability theory, which is sort of the intersection of everything that I love, right? But yes, that's what she talks about, the misfit. I probably should have talked about this at the very beginning. And if anybody's still here, sort of the social model of disability, right? The idea that and she talks about this a lot, the idea that our disability isn't intrinsic to us, it's in the misfit between us and the way the world is built. And that if the world were structured and built in a different way, many of us would be far less disabled by it. So yeah, I totally agree. Spiral Nerd says, I lifeguarded for a while in high school and college at a lake and actually liked it quite a bit. Part-time, nature environment, repetitively scanning, sensory sensitivity kind of being a strength. Yeah, that's interesting. They had an age limit though, and I became too old to keep working there, which sucks. That's interesting. I wonder why they have an age limit. That seems silly. Although I will say that that I think that, like when I was coming out of my divorce, had lost my job as an adjunct, and was trying to scramble together any kind of work that I could. I was in my early 50s. I was basically overqualified or underqualified for everything. And like I applied for lots of jobs, Joel did too. And people just weren't hiring people in their 50s. So like there's like overlapping, right, issues like ageism combined with disability, blah, blah, blah. Like literally, Target didn't want to hire, like nobody would hire me. Couldn't get a job anywhere. Spiral Nerd says there were also really clear rules, which in some ways made the social interactions easier, though I liked when I was in more leadership roles and could bend those rules situationally. I like to support access needs. Yeah, that's great. I like that too, that like sometimes having a kind of script in our job, or at least like rules that we don't have to negotiate except when we want to, can be helpful. Mad Doll says, I appreciate it, Marta, and yeah, they are all connected. Money, relationships, home life, unpaid work, totally. Absolutely. Spiral Nerd says, and that job worked because I had a place to stay for free with my parents and wouldn't necessarily work year round or be as ideal for me indoors at a pool. Definitely hard to find jobs that meet all the needs. Yeah. Paul Saxberg is identifying strongly with those brief windows of productivity that somebody else, who I've already forgotten who it was that said that, but that like, yeah, I think that many of us, like we're expected to be present and pretending to work for 8 hours a day, whereas for many of us, we really only need about 3 hours of those days to get the work done, but we still have to appear like we're working, and the rest of the time, just maddening, isn't it? Denise says, haha, 3 years is my max. I'm assuming you mean in any given job. And yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't even think that I worked at the law firm for a full 3 years. I did work as a high school English teacher for 3 full years. And maybe I did adjunct work for a full 3 years, but that's definitely, and Denise says, and that was the military, so I couldn't just leave. That's funny, Denise. Yeah. The only jobs that we can actually stay in for any amount of time are the ones that we have to. Oh, that's actually was the case with my high school English teaching job. I had gotten a scholarship to get certified as a high school English teacher for free, but in return I had to teach. That was at IU Bloomington. I had to teach for 3 years in the state of Indiana, or I would have to pay them back. So yeah, it was in it wasn't the military, but a similar situation where I had to stick it out for 3 years. And I literally barely made it through that last year. It was awful. Spiral Nerd says, I lifeguarded for 8 summers. So that's by far the longest I've had one job, but I'm sure I only stuck with it that long because it was only the summers. That makes sense. Yeah. And Mad Doll says, this is why I loved being a student so much. School year, then summer, something new, summer jobs. Then fall comes back to school. I was in 2 cities during the year, stimulating in a good way. Yeah, I agree. Like that's interesting because the thing that I have consistently been good at in my life is school. And yeah, like if you're gonna look for a thread through my work life, if you could count school, that is by far the thing that I've stuck with the most consistently and done the best at. So, I was in college for 4 years. I was in law school for 3 years. And then I did a 2-year MFA program. So, yeah, for sure. I get that. Mad Doll. I love school as well. Or at least I did. I think that I'm at the point in my life where I'm kind of done with that too. But in a good way, not in a bad way. All right. Okay, we're at the end of the comments, and we're at the end of what should be the end of the time. And I thought that I don't even know if I have any sort of like parting thoughts or wisdom. I realize that I've just sort of raised more sort of issues that I've resolved. But I do think that, I guess the sort of parting thoughts that I have are that I really do think that there are so many ways that we can design lives that work for us, that we can gather around us peers who understand us and support us, create communities where we're understood and where we have ourselves reflected back to us. There are so many ways that we can do the work of disrupting shame and of healing our traumas and learning how to become good friends to one another, pursue our creative work, make our art, create environments in our homes that really sort of sustain us and accommodate us and work for us. Like, I think there's so many ways that we do have a lot of agency in our lives as neurodivergent disabled people, where even if the world isn't going to accommodate us and isn't going to redesign itself to be to work for us, that we can assert some agency over our immediate environments and over our immediate relationships and communities to make our lives so much better. Like, I do believe that in so many ways and in so many areas of our lives, we have that capacity. But this feels like the piece that I still am just constantly like trying to figure out, like, how do we do this? Like, how do we just feed ourselves and put homes? And I'm not talking about getting rich or being materialistic or, having like, I don't know, big, expensive, fancy lives. I'm talking about, like, I think most of us would be really satisfied to live really modestly. And in fact, I think many of us would embrace that, like, as a value in a world of climate change and poverty and unequal distribution of resources and all of the rest, right? Like, I think that many of us sort of value and embrace living modest lifestyles. But even that can be so desperately difficult for so many of us because of the way work is structured. And it feels like in the work that I do, to try to kind of come up with if not solutions, at least paths towards better lives for neurodivergent people. This is the nut that I still have to crack. And I mean, like, that's so grandiose, right? To say that I'm going to somehow figure the solution out to this. I mean, I think that the solution probably, I don't know what the short-term solutions are. Like, if your bank account is at zero and your rent is due, and if you're in that situation right now, and you're facing bills and blah blah blah, and you don't know what to do today and tomorrow, I mean, other than like figuring out how to work the system, which is so hard and demoralizing itself, or like, I don't know what the solution is in the short term. Again, other than like learning how to work the system. Which again, ironically, we're like disabled in terms of even just like working the social welfare systems that do exist to the extent that they exist, which isn't very much in the United States. But I guess in the longer term, if we're going to have visions and sort of try to be working towards those visions, the vision that I have is that we're just not uniquely, but we are especially poorly situated as neurodivergent disabled people to be, rugged individuals and to be self-sufficient and all of that. Like, I think that the solution is going to have to involve coming together, finding whole new ways of forming families, of forming households, of forming communities, of sharing income, of engaging in mutual aid, and I think that I think that we need to start thinking on that kind of visionary institutional level, and then really figuring out how to get brave in our lives to do that. And it's easier said than done. Like, community is fraught and difficult and challenging, and the institutions that we have, as flawed as they are, of like marriage and of the family and individual households and all of that, as flawed as they are, they can also be comfortable. But I do think that in the long run, we have to start being visionaries and thinking long term, and trying to figure out, because I feel like if we lived more communally, if we figured out how to support one another financially and in other ways, if we honored homemaking and food growing and community building as equally valid as income producing work, if we did all of that, I mean, I know that I sound like a old school utopian hippie, but bear with me. That no one person would need to earn quite so much money, right? Like, you could. I mean, I'm not talking about. I guess I'm not talking about an alternative to capitalism yet. I guess what I'm talking about is, how can we create our own, even within capitalism? Because I don't really believe that the revolution is coming like next week, right? I don't really believe that we're going to dismantle this system from the outside and then build something else up in its place. I believe, to the extent that there is any hope to dismantle the systems that we're enmeshed in, is that we start building now. And so I think that I think that I can imagine. I have a vision. I do have a vision of a sort of community where some people who can do it would work for income, and other people who can't do it would contribute. But I'm nowhere near that yet. But anyway, that's my vision, and I'd love to hear more in the comments, or anywhere else, if anybody else has. Yeah, and especially if you're watching this on the replay, I would love, if you've gotten this far, I would love for you to put your thoughts in the in the comments below, because I would love to be having a conversation about this. This is a real passion of mine. And it bugs me when I don't have answers to things, to problems. I guess I am at heart sort of a problem solver. Anyway, okay, thank you so much. It looks like we're at the end of the chat, and definitely over the time that anybody should devote to my ramblings. So I'm going to go. I hope to see some of you. Many of you are already in DDS. I'd love to see others of you in DDS. And keep an eye out for announcements about vlogs and other live streams and things to come. And thanks so much, as always, for your support of this channel. Bye.